This is The Trend, where you'll get enlightened perspective on trending news and topics with amazing commentary. I'm your host, RTL Faith. Welcome to the podcast, and as always, we breathe the message here that we are here to spread discussion, debate, solution, and overall compassion. Welcome to RTL Rants, and in today's episode, this is what you have to look forward to. And now, compared to then, early 2000s, she said, Norah Vincent, after she did this experiment in the early 2000s, said women had more privilege then. She said women had more privilege then. Now women have way more privilege than mid-early 2000s. Stay tuned for that, as we're going to discuss some very interesting topics. Starting out with Norah Vincent's documentary / book, Self-Made Man. And she talks about the experiences she had turning herself as a woman to a man. Not the transition, but an experiment to see what it's like to live as a man and be perceived as a man. We also are going to dive into two very stupid scams because these organizations are corrupt. Starting off with Brett Favre being a scumbag, and then moving on to some government officials being scumbags in Minnesota. Finishing up, talking a little sports, talking about my predictions for NFL Week 4. Of course, I have a hot take in there, so keep in mind, we're doing a ABC type top 10, and starting out with top 10 anime. Stay tuned for that. How is everybody doing today? We are back, and this is RTL Rant. Very self-explanatory at this point. This is my opportunity to have a genuine dialogue or discussion about any particular topic, and if the room wants to join, by all means. Of course, this is going on a lot of different platforms. I do want to kind of inform people that are listening in the podcast that moving forward, I did change the interviews a little bit that are dropping Tuesdays and Sundays. And those changes are going to be focusing on the dialogue a lot more dynamically. So stay tuned for those, of course. And keep in mind as well that when it comes to these RTL rants, they are recorded and they are done on the Wisdom app. So if you have Wisdom, you can check me out over there. The Trend with RTL Faith. A lot of interesting topics, of course, we're going to be discussing. And some very juicy information as well. Now, of course, I could talk about the scams, and we'll get into the scams and why I'm so hesitant when it comes to charity organizations. I've learned a lot about charity organizations. Some are actual viable people and groups that are trying to do good, but there are just so many scams out there. But before we even dive into that information, I want to talk about something that I learned about relatively recently, and this is known as the Self-Made Man documentary. Self-Made Man documentary was, or book/documentary, you can even find YouTube videos about interviews regarding it, was something created by a woman known as Norah Vincent. Now, Norah Vincent was a woman. She was part of the LGBTQ. She was lesbian. And for this study, for the most part, she wanted to kind of see what it's like to be a man. And by doing that, she's going to spend 18 months living, acting in society, everything as a man. Now, she did do the necessary steps to make sure she was as realistic as possible in terms of the experience. She made sure she took voice classes to make sure her voice was a certain way. Her vernacular was very important to make it more masculine via feminine. She made sure that she had a makeup artist do some makeup on her face, put some hair on her chin, the haircut, the style of clothing. She did every means necessary to make sure that when she's out in public, she is viewed as a man. Now, this was an 18-month experiment of her own volition, and the book was published mid early 2000s. I don't really remember the exact day. And unfortunately, Norah Vincent did commit self-assisted suicide. The reasoning why I wouldn't be able to tell you, but she said after this entire experience she was experiencing depression, identity crisis. So I'm not gonna say that's a one-to-one correlation, but I'm just saying that she did experience a lot of uh, self-made trauma after this experience, and we're gonna discuss why that is in a second. So she did a lot. She did a lot to make sure she was as genuine as possible when she did this interview. And I'm going to go and read quotes from her specifically because I don't want to, put words in her mouth or anything like this. And because what she said and how she said things was so true in terms of the dynamic of how men live their lives versus how women live their lives. And the reason why this is so interesting nowadays is because it seems like there's an ongoing feud between men and women, gender identity, all that stuff. And something like this that happened in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, really shed light that there doesn't need to be a disconnect. There doesn't need to be negative discourse between men and women. There doesn't need to be this animosity by any means. And this is just an example how when you put your foot in someone else's shoes, you get to really see what the other side is like. And what I really liked on what something she did is she was true to what she experienced, but also true to herself as a woman as well. So we'll dive into some of the things she said, and then I'm going to talk about some of the things or some of my own opinions and about the huger topic, right? So the first thing that she did, of course, is she tried to find a group of friends. And in order to do that, she found a bowling team of men that were bowling every week, once a week, and having fun together. There's a lot of examples of that even in current society. There's a men that do fantasy football together. There's men that play pickup basketball at the gym. There's always a group of men that you can do fun activities. She went with bowling. She found a group of men, and she was surprised at how willing they were to accept her into the group. How they didn't really ostracize her by any means, whether she was a bad bowler or not. She also talked about how it was confusing, but very apparent that when men speak to each other a certain way, you've heard it time and time again, some men are very aggressive with one another. They cuss at one another. But it's just a friendly, manly camaraderie for the most part. It's not anything malicious. It's just friendly chatter. And she found that very unique considering her group of friends versus these male group of friends that she infiltrated for the most part. Another thing that she kind of pointed out here, I'm going to make sure I go step by step so I'm not missing anything because a lot of the information that she put out is valuable insight in terms of her experience. First quote she said about it, I mean, it was just the most wonderful rush to get these guys handshakes, and I felt comfortable. I mean, as comfortable as I could feel right away. They just took me in. No questions asked. She was surprised. And someone also answered a question in regards to finding out that eventually Norah was found out that she was a woman. They were completely fine with it. If I'm talking about from my own personal experience, when I have my group of friends and if someone infiltrated and we're like, oh, I'm a woman, none of us will care. None of us will care. It's not really something that we dawn about. It's like, oh no, she tricked me all this time. No, it's not a big deal. If you're cool, you're cool. That's how most men are for the most part. One of the things he said in regards to her expectation, some guy said, I think she expected to find like a bunch of guys just talking about women's private parts, a bunch of racists. They're full of white men, just to give context. And, I think kind of that's what she came into this thinking. And her response after the whole situation and meeting this guy is they really showed me up as being the one who was really judgmental, because they were the ones who took me in, not knowing anything about me. They were ones who made me their friend, no judgment attached. No judgment attached. So that was the first kind of real experience and layout that she had. The entering in terms of men friend groups, very different from female friend groups, and her expectation was completely off. Next thing that she decided to do, or the next important thing to kind of lay out, is she wanted to go to strip clubs. This is like the men thing to do. Personally, for me, strip clubs are not my thing. I'm not gonna just throw money at women. I don't have that innate drive. Sure, I like to do the business, and I've done it a lot, but I'm not too into strip clubs. But this is kind of like a stereotype. I know a lot of guys, personally, that have gone to strip clubs, that have been multiple times. So I can't say she's wrong about that assumption. So she went with a group of guys. She wasn't feeling it either, even though she's lesbian. Also, keep in mind she's lesbian. She wasn't really feeling it either. She had no urge to, she didn't have any sexual drive. But one thing that she noticed, men versus women, based on her own personal perception, is she indicated at its core, in terms of men urges versus female sexual urges, it's a bodily function. It's necessity. It's such a powerful drive. And I think because we, women, don't have testosterone in our systems, we don't understand how hard it is. Talking about sexual attraction, wanting sex, that stuff specifically. She also indicated here that in this arena, in terms of like sexual activity, women have the power. Another very interesting perspective from Norah. And if I'm being completely honest, although it's not an excuse to do anything malicious, men do have physical urges that are purely physical, right? And she indicated it's a testosterone thing. She also said somewhere else, and I want to make sure I catch it, that the difference between men when it comes to like a physical urge versus women is it becomes more of a mentality. Here, this is what she says. I really ran smacking up against the difference between men and female, or male and female sexuality. It's that female sexuality is mental. For a man, it's an urge, is how she put it. That probably have heard it. It's more emotional. There's a lot more thinking when it comes to stuff like that. Whereas men, if they get horny, they get horny, right? So that was the second thing she did that was very meaningful in terms of the insight of men. The next thing, which is the most insightful in my personal opinion, is when she tried to pick up women as a man. She tried to do it. Now, based on when this came out versus dating now, dating has changed tremendously. But what she said is even more true now than it was then. She talked about how she went to a bar. You know, people go into a bar nowadays. That's just not a thing. We don't go to bars. It's all Tinder nowadays, or Instagram, or all that stuff. So she went to a bar and she tried to pick up women. And she talked about the harshness of being said no. The harshness of being completely rejected, despite being a complete, like in a very awkward situation where you're a stranger, you're in the middle of a crowd of people, you take the time to go over there and you're just give out flat rejection, flat out, just not even recognizing your existence. And she talked about how messed up it was. Let me see what her exact words were. In fact, we sit there and just one word, no, will crush someone, she said. We don't have to do the part where you cross the room, in terms of women, where you cross the room, you go up to a stranger that you've never met in the middle of a room full of people and say the first words. And those first words are so hard to say without sounding like a cheeseball or sounding like a jerk. That's what she talked about when it comes to going up to a woman nowadays. Now, in this current generation, our current society, going up to a woman is like just strange now. It's foreign territory. Unless you're innately attractive, you got the muscles and all that stuff. Most women are just going to deny your existence and be disgusted purely from the fact that you walked up to them. So it's even harsher now than it was back then. She does indicate that she did go on 30 dates as Ned, which is her male name, and those were mostly done from the internet, Tinder, or whatever was the internet dating site from back then. She indicated that she was surprised that many women had no interest in soft, vulnerable men. I repeat, she indicated she was surprised that many women had no interest in a soft, vulnerable man. She also stated, my prejudice was that the ideal man is a woman in a man's body. And I learned, no, that's really not. There are a lot of women out there who really want a manly man, and they want his stoicism, which is basically being like emotionless, not vomiting out your emotions to them. Very, very interesting. Because you hear it time and time again, there's some type of confusion on how men should be letting out their emotions and all that stuff. I already gave my insight on how to handle emotions. But you get all this information, then you, on the other side of the spectrum, you get the information to hold it in. And from Norah's experience as a man, she found that most women, which is honestly the reality, whether you want to agree with it or not, most women don't want an emotional guy. Not saying all women don't want an emotional guy. Most women do not want an emotional guy. It is what it is. It is what it is. She also did something, she tried to buy a car with the salesman, and she noticed the difference between how a salesman will try to flirt with her versus, because she's a man, they would be more logical and precise and to the point. Very innate difference right there, telling you the differences between treatment in terms of a salesman. Now, obviously, if that was a woman, it'd be a little different, but it tells you that there are innate prejudice on both sides. It's not equal all the way around. She also talked about meeting monks and the pressures of being potentially being seen as homosexual, feminine to more Catholic or religious groups. These people are definitely not okay with stuff like that and the troubles and the pressures of those situations. She speaks about how one of the latter things is that she speaks on the how she visited a men-only therapy session. Why was that so hard to get out? She visited a men-only therapy session where these men were struggling with vulnerability and emotion. So this men only, they were letting out their emotions for the very first time. And she talked about how they don't get to show their weakness. They don't get to show the affection, especially with each other. And so often all their emotions are shown in rage. How men are mostly in a very tough situations, very angry. They talk about very brutal things such as like slicing up their women and their wives. This was back when, but there probably is situations like that. They don't mean it, but they're just so angry with how everything is going on. Some of them may be, actual abusers, so I don't even want to indicate anything in terms of accepting what they're saying, but it just tells you the rage that a lot of these men who went to these sessions were feeling, and she noticed it and the value of the ability to kind of let everything out. She talked about her situation when she was out in the woods in a retreat with them, and how there was a bunch of angry men, and she felt potentially in danger. Everything kind of turned out fine eventually. And some of her final words in terms of her 18-month experiment is as follows: men are suffering. They have different problems than women have, but they don't have it better, she said. They need our sympathy. They need our love. And maybe they need each other more than anything else. They need to be together. And we'll talk about that in a second. Ironically, Vincent said it took experiencing life as a man for her to appreciate being a woman. I really like being a woman. I like it more now because I think it's more of a privilege. So Norah Vincent, who's a lesbian woman who did this 18-month experiment as a man, has indicated that it's more of from her words, it's more of a privilege to be a woman than a man. There's a lot of valuable information here and a lot of stuff that we can break down, of course. First things first, when she talked about how we need to be together, well, you're seeing the cracks in society currently in terms of how men are kind of, since that period, men have been shat on more and more and more, and the value of the man have been diminishing. Since that time when she was talking about how men should be given sympathy, how men are suffering, it's gotten worse. And the fact that she indicated that men need to be together and they need each other, well, that's how a situation like Andrew Tate was born. And then Andrew Tate was canceled from every social media platform. Everything she said is completely opposite of how society is going on right now. And these are things that she noticed way back when. The fact that men are told that they can be emotional, but most women don't like emotional men. They want a manly man. It's true today. And women, even more so today, don't like you approaching them, period. Back then, okay, you approach them, they don't like you, they say no. Now, you approach them, they will be pissed. They want to, pull the dukes up. How dare you approach me? You see what I look like? How dare you? The perception of man, the confusion of being a man, all these different things going on in current society is very telling. And even this experiment back when, early mid 2000s, giving you firsthand knowledge how men are treated and the perception of men are misguided from women. From a woman herself who was lesbian, part of the LGBT community. Someone like her said this. But currently it's just, man, you suck. White man, kill yourself. It's crazy. It's completely against everything she did this book for. She wanted to learn more of what it's like to be a man in society. Imagine someone doing that now. Imagine someone doing an experiment where they are completely a man. Like, you don't know anything about them, but they're a man, just random guy. How would that experiment go now? It's fascinating what this stuff preaches. It's fascinating the perspective she came from and the conclusions she indicated. And it's fascinating how the conclusions she came up with, the results she found, is completely in line with a lot of what men are craving for in current society, in our current generation. It's why Kevin Samuels got so popular. It's why Andrew Tate got so popular. Men need their role models. Men do need to come together. The value of man needs to be appreciated more. And now, compared to then, early 2000s, she said, Norah Vincent, after she did this experiment in the early 2000s, said women had more privilege then. She said women had more privilege then. Now women have way more privilege than mid-early 2000s. It's just crazy when you really look at what reality is showing beyond a screen, beyond social media, beyond first surface level arguments, beyond all of that. What is really going on? Mental health is a big issue. You've been hearing it time and time again. Men do the hardest jobs. Men have the highest suicide rate. Men get convicted the most. Most violent crimes are done against men. Very easy information to access. despite that information, despite this story from an LGBTQ woman, despite all of that, there's just some innate divide, innate hatred for men. Eventually, I'm going to, on my podcast, when I do an interview, we're going to have this discussion. But it was so interesting to see this book. I didn't read the entire book, but I read a lot of the important information about the book. And it's crazy to see this information. It's called Self-Made Man. A Self-Made Man by Norah Vincent. Again, R.I.P. Like I said, she committed suicide, assisted suicide. And it's an unfortunate situation. But stuff like this, it was appreciated that she talked about it. Definitely appreciated that she spoke about this information. So that is our first topic of the day. And we're going to dive into another topic that, again, is not fruitful in terms of what is going on. And that is one of the idols of man, I guess. He's a manly man to the fullest. He is a Hall of Fame quarterback who's known for throwing touchdowns and throwing interceptions. Well, this time he threw money to a volleyball arena for his daughter by scamming so many people. I'm talking about Brett Favre. Brett Favre, former quarterback of the Jets, the Packers, and the Vikings, has been caught. It's a very unfortunate situation, but we're going to talk about it. It's based in Mississippi is when this stuff actually happened. The Mississippi welfare scandal. Now, initially, he tried to say that I didn't know anything about what was going on. I thought this was for a good cause, but text messages have been released indicating that he is a liar. He is capping. So let's read the text messages. So text messages from Brett Favre with Nancy New, who was part of this welfare scam in Mississippi. She indicated, let me check something. Okay, Brett Favre said, if you were to pay me, is there any way the media can find out when it came from and how much? So this is him asking, this has happened in 2017, by the way. This is him asking, hey, can the media ever find out? She said, no, we never had that information publicized. I understand you being uneasy about that, though. Let's see what happens on Monday with the conversation with some of the folks at Southern. Maybe it will click with them, hopefully. Okay, thanks. Wow, just got off the phone with Phil Bryant. He's on board with us. We will get this done. Awesome. I needed to hear that for sure. This is text message. If there's more, then it is what it is. But this is indicating that Brett Favre knew exactly what was going on all the time. The entire time. And at least $5 million was scammed from the Mississippi welfare system. He scammed these funds out of the welfare system and used it for his alma mater, Southern Miss, to build a new facility, volleyball facility, for his daughter. Call me corrupt. This is a first-hand situation of how corrupt the governmental system can be, and how some of these millionaires, no matter what, if you idolize them or not, can be completely and utter scumbags. At least $5 million taken from the state welfare fund. You know what welfare is used for? It's used for the unfortunate who can't pay for their circumstance. Now, the question of welfare, whether it's something that people need in American society is a different question. Well, what we do know is people don't need a $5 million volleyball court stadium for some women's volleyball. That's what we know for a fact that Mississippi does not want. Also, Mississippi, if you did not know, is the poorest state in the United States of America. So this guy said, screw everybody, period. So there's some question on whether or not Brett Favre can face some prison time for this Mississippi welfare scandal. It's unclear. They're still looking up more and more information. The question is, should Brett Favre should be taken out of the Hall of Fame is also up in the air. But that also plays into the aspect of separating the art from the artist. Should you separate the art of him being a quarterback and his career as an NFL athlete from him being a scumbag after football and outside of football? Should you take away his Hall of Fame credentials because of him being an utter scumbag? That's why the conversation of the art versus the artist is so nuanced. It really depends on where your values lie. Like, R. Kelly's a pedophile scumbag, but will you listen to his music whenever on some random day? Brett Favre is a scumbag who hates the poor, but would you watch some Brett Favre highlights and accept that he's in the Hall of Fame? Now, the art of him playing quarterback in football, the accolade and the achievement of being in the Hall of Fame, the recognition you get from it, you could argue you could take that away. Recognition, appreciation, he doesn't deserve any of that. Everything he's done should stay as is, you may be able to argue. Very nuanced conversation. Because at the same time, we got Michael Vick, right? Michael Vick had the entire scandal. He went to prison, everything with the dog situation, where, he had like a dog fighting rink and all that stuff. There's plenty of other examples of scumbags out there in sports doing terrible things. Even recently in basketball, we got the Ime Udoka cheating on his fiance, wife, whatever, with the VP's wife, and that a whole weird situation. So you got a lot of situations where it's like, okay, you're doing scumbag material, but, should we separate that, you being a scumbag, versus your talents, right? Your talents. Hard line to find. He said that he did indicate that he repaid $1.1 million in funds that were given to him for speeches that he was going to do for the fund, but never did. He never did a single speech. That was all cap. And he apparently owes more than $225,000 in interest, etc. 13 felony courts. Like, Brett Favre is a scumbag. Pretty clear, pretty noticeable at this point in time. Will he get jail? They need more evidence. Should he get taken out of the Hall of Fame? It's a very weird situation. Overall, what we do know is Brett Favre hates poor people, does not like them at all, and would put a $5 million volleyball stadium on a homeless shelter. Yo, Brett Favre don't like it. He tells his daughter, anytime you see a poor person, spit on them. Apparently that's what happens. It's a joke, but I don't know if he does that. I'm gonna be surprised, but I don't know if he does that. So that was the Brett Favre situation. Big scam with the welfare scandal. And crazy enough, that's not even the biggest scam that has happened this year. We're going to talk about another scam, which is even larger. It's crazy. What is these government officials doing? Do they hate people? Yes. They want to take your money. That's all it really is. Before we get into that, we're going to do the medium situation hot take. Hot take in between both segments. It's a fun little thing I'm going to do. And for the hot takes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a hot take top 10 from A to Z. So a topic from letter A to letter Z, quick top 10. And the first hot take top 10 I'm going to have is my top 10 anime. Yes, you heard me. Anime. Top 10 anime. Here we go. Number 10, Vinland Saga. Vinland Saga is fire. Even though it's only one season, the story, the character writing, the animation is all very, very well done. And the twist at the end was perfect. Askeladd, growth, character development, perfect. Number 9, Katekyo Hitman Reborn. It is a shonen series that is very slept on, but has one of the very more interesting power systems, designs, and groups in terms of the Vongel family that I've ever seen. It is 200 plus, 200 plus episodes. Fire. Everybody that I know watched it, said it was amazing. Characters amazing, battles amazing, story not amazing, but good enough to make it interesting. Great job. Number 8, Death Note. Death Note is the pivotal anime series that has one of the most dynamic rivalries between Light Yagami and L. Fantastic, very easy to watch, mind-blowing when you see it. Really good. Number 7, Bleach. Bleach, even though it's not as good as the other 2 big 3 members, has some of the greatest fights, some of the more cool, interesting characters. It deserves a shout. Glad Bleach is coming back. 6, Code Geass, greatest anime ending of all time. One of the greatest and GOATs in terms of protagonists. Number 5, Naruto. Naruto's story is way better than Bleach. I stand by that. And it's so good in terms of the characters, the feeling behind everything that's going on, and the journey of Naruto and Sasuke. 4, Gintama. Hilarious, great action, great characters, great plot underneath all the parody. Number 3, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, ultimately widely considered the greatest anime of all time on my anime list. Very solid, nearly perfect in every way. One Piece, number 2, One Piece is the GOAT. And number 1 is a personal subjective favorite, Attack on Titan. Gets way too much hate, but one of the more unique and best stories that I've ever read in terms of manga and anime. That is my top 10. That is the hot take for today's episode. Moving on to the next segment, we're talking about another scam. And this happened in another state that starts with M. And that is Minnesota. So Minnesota had a recent scandal, a recent scam regarding a $250 million COVID spending fraud. 48 people were charged and indicted based on this recent situation. 48 people involved, and they're still searching. Some very notable people that were involved in this situation. And I quote, let me check and make sure I find it. Hold on. Got to make sure I get their names correct because they got very interesting names. And I quote some of the individuals where I just saw that. Okay, here we go. Amy Bach was at the center, executive director. She was a scumbag. She is a scumbag. Some other people that were involved were... Who was some other people? Oh, here we go. Abdi Saleh, former senior policy aide to Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and Sharmek Issa, former board chair of the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. 2 very important people, as you can see, involved in this terrible fraud. $250 million. And it came from this organization, this charity called Feeding Our Future. That was supposed to be something that fed needy children. What it actually ended up being is a front to pay for cars, luxury goods, jewelry, and property in the USA, Kenya, and Turkey. They said, I'm going to find images of children on the internet, posted it on their page using some site. Maybe it was GoDaddy, maybe it was something else. But they did this. Said, hey, look at the picture I found of a starving child. Donate to me, and over around at least $250 million of funds, not only from random people, but from the government, because these are federal funds as well, was scammed out of them from this program. Scammed over 125 million meals. Created fake rosters of children that were in need. Fake. Random names. They got a children name, baby name generator and kept on pushing generate. Here we go. generate. Here we go. It's it's ridiculous. I agree. They claim to be feeding 2,000 children daily. This and just was lying the entire time. It started around 2019 or 2018-19 area. It was initially $3.4 million in funds and raising all the way around 200 million. Now, obviously, Feeding Our Future has been shut down now, but still, that is crazy. Now, fortunately, they've seized around about $50 million in assets, but that still doesn't cover even half of the amount of money they scammed out of the people and the government. It's insane. This is one of the reasons why I have such a problem with these large charity organizations. Because you never actually know where this money is going to. And that's very valuable information, whether you believe it or not. The reason why this is important is because we got organizations that we've seen popped up in the last like 3 years, that people that are benefiting, manipulating, screwing with people's emotions, people's ignorance, and pocketing off of it. We got people like Black Lives Matter getting millions of dollars and creating, saying that, oh, we're about to help the black community, and purchasing $1 million mansions. We got people like Dr. Umar, who's literally just a meme, but he gets, I don't know how much money, but he said, I'm going to build these schools. Never built these schools. He's pocketing. You're paying for his house, his apartment, his rent, his car. We got so many organizations like this out there, and I just named 2 scams, a welfare fund and this COVID Feeding Our Future fund. There's even more scams out there saying, you're helping me for this, but actually, you're paying for my rent. It's absolutely ridiculous. These charity organizations, these funds, are scams. Now, not all of them are scams. By all means, not all of them are scams. But even with the more legit ones, right? There's so much nuance that people don't realize behind these organizations. One, a lot of rich people use these charity organizations as a write-off so they don't have to pay taxes. So at the front, yeah, it may be helping people, but realizing there's an ulterior motive, and as soon as that motive goes away, the charity will disappear. There's also the essence of a lot of these organizations that are supposed to be helping, like, for example, another country in terms of their situation is actually crippling them because they are not self-sufficient, and they can't become self-sufficient because they're given free stuff. That's even apparent in America, and it has been proven to be very huge detriment, not only to unfortunate communities in America, but other more developing countries. This is a fact. Look it up. So even with the legit charity organizations, there's a whole lot of flaws to the system. Sure, you could be helping someone in the short run, but the problem is the overall bigger picture, right? The overall bigger picture is something to be looking at. Not only do you're at risk of a scam organizations, but also the aspect is that the organization itself, even though it's a good cause and backed by good people, could be actually more detrimental than good. Again, not saying all organizations are like that. I think there's quite a few that actually do actual good for their community, for the people that they're helping. There are people who are actual good people that are doing some good things in the community. And I'm not even saying you shouldn't donate to any charities. All I'm saying is look into it. All I'm saying is get more information. All I'm saying is verifying where your money is going to. Do not blindly support an organization, a charity, etc., just because it looks good. just because it hits every box in terms of your emotional response. Do your research. This is your money. You never know where it truly may be going. That's why that's why I have so much trouble with these organizations that are not built out of a specific agenda, or let me be more precise. They're not built off a specific plan, but just purely off an ideal or idea or whatever, which is right. I'm not really sure. So again, another very unfortunate circumstance. Very unfortunate indeed. Okay, with that said, we're going to move on to our final segment. This is sports related. If you care about sports, you're gonna care about this. Now, of course, when it comes to me, I did do a full-on week 3 predictions for the NFL. Now, I actually was 7 out of 16 I got correct. Let's see if we could do better. 7 out of 16. That's a little bit less than half. Not ideal. We need to do better. I got the Steelers Browns right. Panthers Saints. I'm not going to go through all of them. Let's just say some of them did not see coming. Like the Dolphins Bills. The Chiefs versus Colts. Did not see those coming. I did get the Seahawks beating the Falcons right. You know, I'll give my pat on the back for that. But yeah, it was tough. So with that said, let's do predictions again and see if we can get the next week correct. Bengals versus Dolphins. This is a tough game, but Tua may not play. But with that said, I think the Dolphins will eventually get figured out, and I think the Bengals have finally figured out themselves how to play football again. I'm going to give the Bengals the benefit of the doubt and say they come up with a W. Vikings versus Saints. The Saints lost to the Panthers. They don't deserve a win here. Vikings, you better win. Get Justin Jefferson the ball. Browns versus Falcons. The Falcons actually have been very good, but I think as long as you give Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb the ball, you should come out with a victory. Although Myles Garrett, hoping you're feeling better, don't know if he's playing that game. Bills Ravens will be very tough, but I do think, even though Lamar Jackson has been playing out of this world, now that he's about to play a legit defense, he may struggle a little bit, especially if he's down. If he starts coming from behind, then it'll be tough. I think the Bills win. Washington Cowboys. Cooper Rush somehow won 2 games. Don't know how he plays Washington. Carson Wentz has been looking sus again. The defense has been looking kind of sus as well. Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs have been doing their job. At Cowboys, I'll give it to the Cowboys. Lions, Seahawks, Lions. I'm going to give you the Lions. Lions have been very good, although DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown don't know if they're playing, so we'll see. Chargers, Texans. Chargers to win that game. If they don't, they're trash. Titans, Colts. Whew, this is a tough one. You got Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry both playing very subpar. Colts beat Chiefs out of luck. Titans actually looked very good against the Raiders, giving Derrick Henry the ball with the play action, all that stuff. At Colts, I'll give it to the Titans. Giants, Bears. If you give Khalil Herbert the ball, even though like inherently I'm a Giants fan, I still am so unsure. The Bears defense is really good. I'm gonna give it to the Bears. Jaguars, Eagles is a tough game. Jaguars have been playing lights out. Eagles have been playing lights out. I'm going to say upset alert, give it to the Jaguars. Jets, Steelers, Zach Wilson comes back. Zach Wilson beats the Steelers. Unless TJ Watt comes back, but I don't think he is. Cardinals, Panthers. Panthers suck. Cardinals win. Patriots, Packers. Mac Jones is not playing. Aaron Rodgers and the Packers win. Broncos versus Raiders. Russell Wilson has been dog doo-doo. And Devontae Adams needs to get the ball. Raiders win. They better win. Chiefs, Buccaneers. I'm going to give it to the Chiefs because I don't like Tom Brady. And Rams, 49ers, I'm going to give it to the Rams because Jimmy G is dog water. So that is my predictions for the week 4. Let's see if I'm correct. Moving on when we have our episode next week. Any last things? Well, that's kind of all we got for today's episode. Appreciate you guys joining RTO Rant. Again, let me try to reiterate. I do episodes on Wisdom app. If you use Wisdom, I record my episodes there. And of course, it's going to be published. The audio is going to be published on a lot of different these platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. So if you are there, make sure to give a rating, leave a review so I can read the review on our episodes. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. You all have a good one. Have a conversation with someone, have a debate with someone, have discussion. Hopefully some of these topics were enlightening. Take care. Peace. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast episode. Just a reminder to never miss an episode. If they publish Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday at 7 a.m. EST. So if you're driving to work or you're working out, tune into the podcast. Also consider visiting the website www.thetrendwithrtlfaith.com and leave a review so I can personally thank you for your support to the podcast. So again, thank you so much for listening. And remember that solutions can only really be made through proper conversation and discussion. Take care.